Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Healing Our Children 2018 World Summit. I'm Alison Morris, your host from Full Potential Parenting, and I'm really happy to have you here with us today. And today I'm really delighted to have as my guest, Helen Joy Butler, who is, get this, is a really cool title, a certified elemental space clearer. She's one of only a few in Australia to have studied under the internationally renowned teacher and Hay House author Denise Lynn. Helen blends practicality and spirituality in a way that brings true connection to her client's life, all through the concept of sanctuary, which is what we're going to be talking about today. How wonderful does that sound? And she also has a business called Clutter Rescue, which helps people, as the name implies, deal with the clutter in their homes. So she's also a professional organizer, and you can see how those two things would work very well together. So thank you for joining us, Helen. Welcome to the summit.
Oh, thank you, Alison, for having me. It's very exciting to be here and to connect with you across such a distance.
Yes, it's so exciting. And you're in Brisbane, correct?
I am in Brisbane, so that's
okay.
On the east coast of Australia.
Yes, I have been there once and held some koalas, which I have documented somewhere in a very silly photograph. But anyway, space clearing is not something I think too many people are familiar with. And yet our language already implies that we have some familiarity with this, because we talk about needing to clear the air if something's gone wrong. Or we talk about how you walk into a room and you can, feel the energy, or it feels dead, or, we have all these words that we use that describe actually the energy of a space. And so I wonder if you could start by helping us understand what the heck space clearing is, and then we can talk a little bit more about what it involves, what you do, or what the sort of the and specifically what the elemental part is, because I find that very intriguing.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's interesting because historically and culturally, a lot of different cultures have done space clearing. So even if we look at, Native Americans, the Chinese, medieval Europe, in the Middle East, even some of the practices that we have in churches these days, a lot of the elements that have been brought across culturally for hundreds or thousands of years are starting to become more aware, or more in people's consciousness now. So it's interesting. It's like thousands of years ago, people were doing these practices, and then they've kind of disappeared, and they're starting to come back into vogue or back into fashion. And as we know, that can be a little bit scary, because sometimes people get a little bit crazy with whatever's in vogue and whatever's in fashion. But what I'm trying to do through the space clearing that I do is to help people connect with harmony, help people connect with balance, and as you've already said, with that concept of sanctuary, both in their homes and their bodies and their lives. So we start by looking at a space and help to clear the energy, the dense, heavy, stagnant, stifling, uncomfortable energy in a space. And we kind of clear that out, and then we bring in or activate those beautiful energies that we want. So we might want love or compassion or connection or joy in the space. And what happens is, I might use, for example, gongs or smudge sticks or other kind of elements to help do that. But ultimately, the outcome is greater connection for the family, greater connection for the person in the space. And I think if we look at that as an end goal for a space clearing, it sounds pretty beautiful, don't you think?
Yeah, it sounds quite lovely. And as we were speaking earlier, I think so many of the people watching are in spaces that have had a lot of conflict and a lot of pain and tears and possibly even violence. And if people are on a spectrum depending on sort of their family situations. And so it's intriguing to think that there's a sort of residual energy that remains in a room, in a space, in a home, just as the outcome of those interactions with, among family members. Can you speak to a little bit more about how that happens and how that works? Because I think that's maybe a little bit foreign to some people to sort of think about it, even if intuitively they kind of know, oh yeah, it doesn't feel very good in here anymore.
Yeah. Well, see, I have this concept. I work with the infinity symbol a lot. And, I kind of go, okay, if we've got, for example, chaos outside the home and there's chaos inside the home, there's really no balance or harmony going on in there. So if we think about the concept that my home directly impacts my energy. So, for example, if I've got a lot of clutter outside my, in my space, or if I've got unhealthy food in the fridge, or I've got, people in the space who I don't really want to connect with, that's going to affect my internal energy. And then my internal energy, so if I'm feeling sad, if I'm feeling sick, if I'm feeling anxious or depressed or scared or not safe, then that will have an impact on the external environment because I won't want to clean the space, or I won't want to cook myself a healthy meal, or I won't want to hang out with the people here because there's this interaction that's going on with us. So if we just take that infinity symbol and we kind of go, if I can create some calm or some sanity or some safety on the outside, then maybe I can do some of the internal work to help me come back to center as well, and vice versa. So if it's okay, do you mind if I share a little story about a client of mine and her home?
Oh yeah, please do. That would be great.
So I've just done a really big space clearing at the end of 2017 with a client. So I'd done some work with her on decluttering and organising different aspects of one of her homes. She then bought a second home and moved house. And the beautiful new home she's in is the one I did a space clearing on. And when she moved in, she contacted me straight away and she said, Helen, I really need you to do a space clearing on my home because I feel like the previous owner, particularly the lady, hasn't let go of the property. And one reason why I feel like she hasn't let go of the property is because she was very sick, very unwell in the space. So the home for the previous owner was a space where she recuperated, where she took time out, where she probably had perhaps medical practitioners come and visit her in the home to try and help her move through the health issues that she was facing. So then when the previous owner moved out, a lot of that energy was stuck in the house, and particularly in certain rooms where she'd spent a lot of time. So I did a clearing on the whole house, and then it was obvious that there were a couple of spaces that really held a lot of her emotional energy. So one was her bedroom and one was another room in the house, which was just set up as a child's bedroom. Her children had grown and moved on. But there was a beautiful window seat, and the lady I picked up used to sit in that window seat a lot and look out the window because it had a beautiful aspect. So it was obviously a great healing space for her. So those two rooms in particular were really heavy, dense, stagnant, carried a lot of her healing, pain, energy going on in there, but at the same time, her want of not wanting to leave. So I did that clearing about last November, and then I was with that same client only this week doing other work. And prior to going, my client had said to me, I still feel like there's some heavy energy, particularly in the bedroom. We've painted the bedroom, but I still feel like there's something going on there. So then while I was there doing the other work, I just took about 20 minutes, half an hour, just to clear that bedroom more thoroughly. So it just shows that our spaces, because everything is energy, our space absorbs the energy of whoever has actually been in that space. And even if it's just someone who's visited me for 10 minutes, but we've had an argument and then they've gone and they've never come back again, that energy is still there. And we need to, if we can, shift it quickly so that it doesn't take root. Because when it takes root, that's when it can take longer and need a bit more of a practiced hand at removing the energy.
So that's an interesting concept. Can you say a little bit more about what that means? Is that just a matter of duration? Like or is it the intensity of the emotional exchange that may have happened in the space?
Yeah, that's a really good observation. I would say that it's both. So if you come into my home, and this would never happen, Alison, but if you came into my home and we had a really heated argument, and it was really kind of cutting to my core, so it really impacted my soul or my energy or who I believe I am here to be, and then you left, what would happen is that I would carry that. I would carry that, and it would take it might take root in me very quickly because I'm a sensitive soul. If I'm in a space and there's subtle bullying or subtle negativity, just that, sometimes workplaces have this where there's just subtle undertones, and then it nearly becomes deeper, because it's gone on for longer and it's become a culture. And that doesn't have to be a workplace, it can be a home as well. So both will impact the space and both will impact you. It's just perhaps that subtle, slower, negative energy, I believe over time can actually be harder to remove. Not saying the other isn't difficult to remove, because often that's cut me to the core, but this other one it's quite insidious. It's a little bit like the flu, it kind of spreads.
Yeah, it sort of seeps into the pores of the space. So then, that makes sense to me. Can you say a little bit about the elemental aspect of space clearings? When I think elemental, I think water, earth, air. Now I can't think of the other one. Fire, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Is that what that's referring to? And
yes.
Are those elements what are used then to do the clearing, and depending on what the energy is that's in the room that needs to be cleared out?
Needs to be cleared, yeah. And different practitioners will focus obviously on different aspects, right? So yes, you are right. You're talking about the different nature elements, but we're also talking about, north, south, east, west, cardinal elements also. So when I do my work, I focus a lot. So one of the things I do is I create what I call an altar for each of my space clearing clients. And on that altar, there's always crystals. So we're talking, a lot of earth energy, because there's lots of rocks on there. They might look pretty. They're not. They might be bright.
Yeah, they do come from inside the earth, though. Yeah,
that's right. They come from inside the earth. I always use a candle. So we're talking fire energy. And at times I have used plant energy as well. So I might get some flowers and they'll go on the altar, but also I will use sound, and sometimes in my bowl I will put water. So I'm using water energy in there as well.
And the sound aspect, what element does that refer to, or is that a separate thing altogether?
That's actually a really good question. I don't know if I've ever been asked that or if I've ever thought about it. But I suppose if I thought about it, I would
maybe
say
air.
Even air or wind energy.
Yeah.
And behind me, I'm not sure what you can see, but, there's feathers and something. So, if you're moving those, we're talking air as well. So, yeah, we're talking about, those earth elements, but we're also talking about, cardinal north, south, east, west elements. And it's beautiful. The great thing about different space clearing practitioners is they will bring their take to it. Often I will also use essential oils, and as you know, essential oils will be coming from different plants as well. So it's beautiful because we can choose different aspects and elements to bring to our clients' need around, what it is they want from the space clearing.
So I think some people might be familiar with the concept of maybe smudging, burning sage, as a sort of a Native American tradition. Incense, of course, is one. You mentioned the church is a big aspect, at least in some denominations, Catholics Episcopals. I don't know if others do quite as much in sort of the mainstream. Um, but I think a lot of people aren't really familiar, like when you talk about gongs or like I have a Tibetan singing bowl, just a little baby one.
Beautiful.
What's the concept behind using these things? What is it doing? Is it replacing certain energy with new energy? Is it transforming the energy that's there into something that's a higher vibration? Or what's the kind of the magic of what's going on?
The magic behind the scenes,
right? And obviously we're guessing, right? It's not like we're quantum physicists here, but
yeah.
What do you think is going on?
Yeah. So if I was to have a bath or a shower, so me as Helen, and that's cleansing me. It's washing away the dirt or the grime, or but then I also might be adding something to it, like I might be shampooing my hair, or I might be using beautiful lotion. So essentially what I've done is I've washed away, what I don't really want on my body, but then I'm adding to it things that I do want, whether that's a nice smell or clean hair. So if we look at space clearing and the different tools that we might use, so let's talk about gongs and smudging, because most people tend to know these, particularly smudging nowadays. So if I was using a smudge stick and I was going around a room and I was clearing it, what I might find is the smoke on the smudge stick might be going crazy, just kind of really smoking a lot in certain parts of the room, but then other parts of the room, it's really dead and just, a little bit of wispiness coming. If I'm using a gong, I might be, or a Tibetan singing bowl, I might be gonging it, and it might sound really tinny or really, just uncomfortable to listen to. But then in other spots, it might feel really harmonious and really beautiful and warm. So essentially what I'm doing in both of those instances, according to the sound I'm hearing or what I'm seeing with the smoke, is I'm going to spend more time in that part of the room clearing that energy, because something there is stuck. Do I need to know what's stuck? No, doesn't matter. Don't need to analyze it. But what I would do, because I do use my singing bowl a lot, the reason I don't use smudge sticks a lot is because I've actually done entire house clearings using a smudge stick, and it actually ends up being too overwhelming, the smell. Not saying don't use it, but
I'm not a big fan.
A whole house is way too much. Do a room, fine. But what I'm doing is I'm going around with the gong, and if I hear a tinny sound, I'm going to just stop there. I'm going to just gong, and I'm going to gong, and I'm going to gong until that sound becomes clear. And that then has just shifted the energy from being stuck, heavy, stagnant, whatever it was, to a clearer energy. So I suppose it's a bit like if I had grime on a window and then I decided I wanted to wash it off, I've now just made it clearer.
Okay. Now, I'm going to be play the skeptic here. I can hear some people saying, oh, this is crazy. We could just air the house out by opening the window or blowing a fan or spraying some air freshener. I mean, we're not talking about scents though here, right? We're not talking about odors. We're talking really about energy.
We are, yes.
Is not something that, I don't know, maybe there are some people who can smell energy. I've never really thought about that before, actually. I think people are actually more intuitive about the energy in a room or a space than they give themselves credit for. Have you found that to be true?
100%. And I'll guarantee most people would say, oh yeah, after the fact, they might go, oh yeah, I could tell there was a weird feeling in that room, but I wasn't sure why. And then they might find out 2 weeks later that, there had been some massive argument or something in that space. So look, I understand. And, opening up the windows, I love that idea. But, the air freshener and so on, it's not really going to shift the energy. Look, honestly, some people will not pick up on this at all. And that's okay, because they're not attuned to either their intuition or their senses or the energy in the space well enough to kind of go, oh, this feels uncomfortable in here. Some people are mildly attuned and some people are highly attuned. So it was interesting. I posted on my private Facebook page that we were doing this conversation today. And if you could ask me any question around space clearing, what would it be? And one lady came back and her question was, how can you tell that you need one? And so when I hear that question, I hear a lady who's interested in it but can't feel the energy in the space. And there's no judgment around that. It's just then going, okay, well, what could this look like for you, for me as a practitioner, to help you move through? And sometimes it's trust. You know, if we go see a medical practitioner, we don't know necessarily, you know, how the process goes for a particular operation or a particular procedure. We just have to trust, knowing that the outcome gets us to where we want to be.
Yeah, that makes sense. So again, a lot of the families who are watching, they may have years and years of some pretty painful conversations, arguments, you know, all sorts of emotional, really big emotional stuff going on in their home. How long does it take then to clear an entire, I assume then you wouldn't actually, in that instance, it wouldn't be a room, it would be an entire home that you would want to clear. And then sort of the natural question is, how long does it last, right? I mean, if the next day, I mean, what you were talking about earlier is that once the energy of the home shifts, hopefully that shifts the internal sense of safety and calm within, so that it would actually regulate our nervous systems on a really physiological level, which of course all the parents are like, yes, please. Yeah. We want that for our kids. We want that for ourselves too.
Yes.
But, you know, life isn't perfect. The next day there's an argument. Has that like ruined everything? You know, are you, or,
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a really good question. I had a client who lives in New Zealand and I did a distance space clearing for her. And she contacted me about 6 or 8 months after the initial space clearing that we had done. And she'd said to me, would the space clearing have, like, is it still working, in inverted commas? And if so, to what extent? And it's a great question, right? Because we want to clear the energy. We want it to remain perfect forever, but nothing does. And so if I do a clearing on a home, it could last a week, it could last a month, it could last a year, depending on what's going on in there. And sometimes it comes down also to, because when I do an in-home space clearing, I have the client with me. And so he or she helps me clear the room and they do the entire process with me. So by the end of it, they know all the mudras we've done or all the intentions we've set, all of that. So there can be a little bit of maintenance on the client's behalf. But the thing that makes the space clearing that I learned through Denise different to just, you know, if I walked around and used my gong or walked around and used a smudge stick, is the concept of intention. So if I come into your home to do a space clearing, I'm really carrying strongly the intention of my client. Now, my client might be in a really difficult place emotionally and spiritually and isn't in a place to carry those intentions herself. So therefore, that's what I'm there to do. And so we shift the energy. We, you know, a space clearing in a home can take 2 hours to 2 days or longer, depending on the size and what we find. And then I'm carrying the intentions both in the space clearing, but also before I do the space clearing and after, for about a month for my client, to help him or her ease into the concept of the space clearing. Because what I found in my experience, regardless of the homes that I've done the space clearing in, is that people take time to adjust to the new space. It's like if I move house, it takes me time to adjust to using, you know, the drawers in the kitchen or wherever things laid out. But once the energy in the space is cleared, it can take a little time to adjust to that as well. So I'm holding them and carrying them But, you know, coming back to your initial question, how long can it last? It can be short, medium, long term, and sometimes it's that maintenance. Sometimes it's just going back and revising, like I said earlier with my client, go, okay, we just need to rejig this one room because this is kind of still not feeling okay.
And thank you. That makes a lot of sense. So intentions are key. And I think for a lot of the children in our lives who are struggling so much, feeling safety is a huge part of it, because they don't feel safe, especially those with a trauma and attachment backgrounds. Mm. Also, to some extent, with kids on the autism spectrum. Mm. How much do you think can we shift our space ourselves, just even incrementally, by having a sort of an intention about the energy in a room? Is that doable, with not to probably the same extent as a complete space clearing, but are there ways that we can make minor shifts ourselves in that way?
Definitely. So a couple of years ago, I'd share another story, if that's okay, Alison.
Yeah, absolutely.
A couple of years ago, it was July, and I had, let's just call it a mini breakdown. I felt as though how I was showing up, who I was in the world, even how I was dressing, was being judged. And I had a real, mini breakdown over it. And what I decided to do, coming back to this concept of sanctuary, is that in August, I did what was called 31 days of sanctuary. And 31 days because there's 31 days in August. And each day I woke up and I connected with one thing that day that brought me sanctuary. Just one thing. So it was, for example, a cup of tea, or the sunrise, or our dog, holding hands with my child, my pillow, my scarf, like just one thing. And then what I did was I would connect with the energy of that thing throughout the day as my emotions dipped. So I would go, okay, what was it about, or what is it about this scarf that brings me sanctuary? And I'd say, well, it keeps me warm. I love the colours. It really lifts my colouring, or goes with my outfit, or whatever I would think about throughout the day. So when I had the dip, it would help lift me up. And what I discovered by about halfway through the 31 days was a real shift in my intention to show up as me. And then by the end of the 31 days, I'd really felt supported. I'd felt nurtured. I'd felt like I'd given myself exactly what I needed to be able to get through the other side and feel okay with who I was, be okay with how I was showing up in the world, and be okay with whether people judge me or not. It doesn't matter. Now, I share that, and it's actually quite a hard story for me to share because it was quite a difficult time. But I do believe that if we can, like, my intention at the time was to make me feel safe, to make me feel okay, and not less than. So I was really strong in what my intention was. And I worked out a way, and of course, I shared it on social media. Here's a photo of 31 Days of Sanctuary, and other people got involved as well. And people are still doing it, and people are still asking for it. Like, when are you bringing it back, Helen? So I really do believe, even with our children, I had a conversation with our son's teacher today, and she said, oh, has he got any goals? And I kind of, in my head, I kind of hear, how about we go with intentions? Because I didn't say this out loud to her, but intentions to me have a much more gentler energy. It has a much more honouring energy of who I am in my physical body and my space. And it allows me to move gently toward what it is. And that's my makeup as well, so I can't fight that.
Well, and to me, goal also has a sort of an action-based aspect to it. Yeah. That intention doesn't necessarily mean that you're the one sort of making things happen, which feels nice, right? Because then you can get support from other places too. It doesn't always have to be you.
Yeah, and see, if we come back to that whole infinity concept again, when I think of a goal, if I write down a goal, like I know I want to sell 1 million books, it feels like it's me pushing this goal out. Whereas if I think of intention and I think, okay, I just want to be able to share my message with the world. And if we look at 31 Days of Sanctuary, it's really, what can I use on the external to help me heal internally? That's how I see the difference too.
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea of decluttering, right? It feels such a relief to think about getting rid of things we no longer need and not seeing it all over the place. That's quite freeing in and of itself. Yet most of us don't do a very good job actually at remaining clutter-free. We might go to town one day, but how does all that clutter affect the energy of a space?
Oh, it like 100% does. I don't know how to say that any other way. When I do a space clearing, one of the very first questions I say to my client, whether we're going into her home to do it or it's a distance, is how much clutter is in the space. Because if we even, and let's go to the extreme of clutter, and not everybody's here, but if we go to a hoarder's home, and a hoarder said to me, Helen, can you do a space clearing? It would be truly unethical of me to do a space clearing in there because it's not going to do anything. It will, a little, but because there's so much clutter, because there's so much stagnant and heavy and dense energy in the space clearing would be not as effective by any stretch of the imagination. So the first step of the process needs to be that decluttering. But as we said, actually, before we started the interview, Alison, I was saying there's a difference between decluttering and organizing. And I think that the problem is that a lot of people declutter. They say, that's it, I've had enough of all of this and it's going to the tip. And they send it to the tip or put it in the rubbish bin or whatever they do. And then they don't look at what they've got left and organize it in a way that works for them. Mm-hmm. So, I might go through my office and I might get rid of all the paperwork that I don't need, or I might go through the pantry and get rid of the food I don't need. But if I've just then left it in the state that it was in prior to me getting everything out, meaning I haven't organized it, then chances are I won't maintain it anyway. And it will build up eventually over time to be what it was before you started the process anyway.
So darn.
Yeah.
Right? So a little bit of work to do on that front. But that doesn't surprise me because I think we all know that feeling once you've got everything in the right place and you've gone through. I mean, I just took about 10 bags of things to a donation center today. And it's like, it does. It just makes you feel lighter. Just to get rid of all the things that we accumulate. So that doesn't surprise me at all. Remote space clearing is another concept that may have people thrown a little bit.
Yeah.
What can you do to a space if you're not in it? How does that work?
That's a good question. It's a really good question. So you can shift because energy is energy. And people might have heard of distance clearings, like physical clearings on their body. So, they might lie in their bed and a practitioner is working from wherever she's working from, and they can then feel sensations in their body and they think, this feels kind of weird. But then if they connect in with the practitioner, she might be saying, oh yeah, I was working on your body at that particular time. So it's no different to doing a distance space clearing. But the key to the distance space clearing is the hand-drawn floor plan that the client sends me. Now, it can't be architectural floor plans because that's got some computer technician, draftsman's person's energy in that. It has to be the hand-drawn floor plan. And that puts the intentions, the energy of the client in it. And then over the floor plan, I do a clearing, and I do exactly the same thing as if I was in your home. I use sound, I use mudras. I often close my eyes and I can picture myself in that space actually clearing the room. So I know it sounds a little bit out there, but I've done quite a number of distance space clearings over the last 6 months, and some of them have related to properties that have been on the market for sale for a very, very long time. And we've done a clearing and then we've got a sale on the property. So, there are lots of elements that brought that sale about, but the space clearing definitely made an impact.
Yeah. And well, we talk about different energy modalities on the summit quite a bit. So I hope people aren't too thrown by the concept of distance space clearing. It's all quantum physics, right, at its base, that energy is all connected. So it's still, but it's a sort of an interesting concept, again, that you would have to have people draw. What if they get it wrong? I mean, right, I'd be worried. It's like, I forgot the bathroom, or, that closet wasn't really in the right space. And
it doesn't have to be perfect.
Okay.
And you know what? If you asked me to draw my floor plan, I'd probably get it a bit wrong as well, because some things are hard to draw, like the cupboard under the stairs or whatever. How do you make that visible? Right. On a floor plan? You just have to write notes and say, cupboard under the stairs, or something like that. But one thing that I pick up, like I had this client, she lives in another state, a long way away from me. And while I'm doing the space clearing over the floor plan, I'm picking up nuances in the house. And one of the places I picked up some interesting energy was in the kitchen. And I said to her, I feel like the kitchen is a place that you go to hide. And I said, I don't mean hide as in hide away, but what I mean as in hide as in I'm in here, I can do my own thing, I can block out the noise of my family or the visitors, and I can say, I'm going to go into the kitchen to wash up, I'm going to go in the kitchen to make the salad or whatever. And it's a place where she withdraws to. Now, this is a lady I've never met. We hadn't spoken. We'd done everything online by email and so on. And that was some of the feedback I gave her after I did the space clearing. And she then came back to me afterwards and she said, I can't believe you picked up on that. And you know what? I would never have thought it beforehand, but when you said it, it's very true. So, it's all energy. It's just how does it present to me while I'm doing the space clearing?
So that raises an interesting question. How much information do you need or do you want about what's happened in a home and for how long before you do a space clearing?
It's a good question. My sister bought a new home last year. She didn't know anything about it, other than it was, close to where she currently lives, but she didn't know anything about the previous owners or anything. And I did a space clearing on that. And as I said earlier in our conversation, sometimes you don't need to know what's gone on in the space. You just know, there's something there and you need to clear it. The process I use with distance clearing clients is I ask them to fill out some questionnaires and give me some feedback just so I know where they're at. But what I do before the process, so say you said, Helen, can you do a clearing on my house? The very first thing I would do is I'd get my oracle cards, I'd get my journal and my pen, and I'd pull some cards on the house and I'd ask questions and get feelings around you, your energy in the space, how the house supports you, all that kind of stuff. And I'd be writing notes. So I do that before I read anything that the client gives me. And then what I find, there's often quite strong synergies between what I've picked up before I've even seen a floor plan, before I've even read their questions. So to answer your question in essence is I can go with a little bit of knowledge or a lot of knowledge. And more often than not, I pick up what I need to know through the clearing anyway.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. And I just had this really awesome question that completely flew out of my head. I'm just going to see if I can get it back here. Had to do with, oh boy, something about, oh, I know what it was. I came back. I'm wondering if you have instances of, say, where a couple, my guess is it's generally the wife who's reaching out to you. I could be wrong about that, but that's my guess. And that probably the husband or partner is skeptical, not a big believer, thinks it's all a little woo-woo, whatever. And then I'm wondering if are there examples then of, you've done the clearing and then you've heard later that the skeptical member of the household has actually noticed a real difference afterwards.
And you are spot on there to start with. You were spot on. Yes, it's usually the lady, and yes, it's usually the man who's the skeptic. What I normally find in that instance is that things might start to shift or change in the skeptic's world for the better. Now, that skeptic won't be the person going, oh, that's because of the space clearing, but things will start to shift. So it might be a new job comes in, or a new opportunity opens up, or something happens that's favourable in their life. And if I took a little invisible thread and linked that back to my client and our intentions and what she wanted from the space clearing, I can see a clear straight line, like easy as. And, I've had many clients who haven't even told their partner that we're doing this because they feel like they would be judged around their belief in it. And that's okay. They're there. They honour and respect the process, and they know it will benefit them. And then over time, of course, as I've just said, they see the change, they see the shift, and they know that it's really worked.
Yeah, that makes some sense. And it's not like you're working directly with their energy so that you would need their permission to do that. This is a little bit more external, right? So it's this sort of different issue. So many of the kids of the folks who are watching, in general, I think almost all of them are highly sensitive. Call them empathic. They pick up on energies of other people. They probably are reacting to a lot of energy that isn't theirs. We've had people talking about that before too. So they get distressed because they don't know how to set up boundaries to keep other people's stuff away from them. Mm-hmm. So the idea of a sanctuary that they could come back to, I'm not even sure what my question is here. I guess I'm wondering if you could talk a little just about maybe the potential impact that could have in calming and settling and being a place of peace and serenity and all those lovely words that just make us want to sigh, right? And just relax.
Yeah, entirely. And you know what? I can speak from a very personal perspective here as well. And interestingly, on my desk here, I've got a book on the highly sensitive child. I have a highly sensitive child who has just turned 12. And he, as you can probably appreciate, given the work that I do, has had a lot of immersion in the concept of sanctuary, in the concept of caring for yourself at a heart level. And only about, I think 3 weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks ago. So he's just moved into high school, what we call high school here. And, he's got a lovely bedroom, but it didn't really have a theme. His bed was going in one direction, with his head, for example, against the wall, and he was lying in the other direction. And he had bad sleep. He was fearful. He wanted to go to sleep. He was exhausted, but he didn't want to go to sleep because the fears were, overtaking him. All we did in that first instance was we turned the bed 90 degrees. Made a massive difference. The bed is in the completely weirdest spot in the bedroom you're ever going to come across. It doesn't make natural sense to put the bed in that spot. Doesn't matter. He feels safe. He can now go to sleep in there. He's not worried anywhere near as much. The second thing about 3 or 4 weeks ago was he said, I really want to make my room a sanctuary, and what I want to do is give it a real nature theme. So what he hears in his head is, he wants bed linen that kind of looks like it's got trees on it. and he wants. We were at a shop, and they've got all these Easter things out at the moment, and there
Yeah.
was this big green grass-looking rabbit. So that kind of stuff. He just wanted to bring in elements of nature. Now, if I think of the concept of nature, I'm thinking of grounding. I'm thinking of being calm. I'm thinking of connecting with myself. I mean, it's such a harmonious colour, isn't it, really, green? So another element that we've brought into his room is I've gridded the bed with crystals. So I said earlier I use crystals on altars, but one of the things I also do is grid beds or grid rooms with different crystals, which help bring him a sense of calm. So what we've found, just even in the 3 or 4 weeks that we've shifted to this nature theme, is that he now wants to go to bed and leave the light on and read a book and just, be in the space, because it's his space. He owns this space. Whereas before, when he didn't have a theme and the bed was in the weirdest spot for him, he didn't feel safe in there, he didn't want to go in there. So we've shifted the energy to a space that he now wants. And this is one of the things I talk about a lot with my clients, is that, we can be thinking of sanctuary for ourselves. I want this as a woman, or that as a woman, or whatever we want. But I really do think it's part of our role, particularly if we've got sensitive, empathic, intuitive, psychic kids. We have to help them connect with their own version of sanctuary. And it will take time. My son only realised, nature was the concept that he wanted to work with. Will it change over time? Highly likely, but that's okay. It's so important that we bring this sense of sanctuary to our children. And even if that means this house doesn't feel safe at the moment, we're leaving, that then gives the child a distance between, the space and where they now are. So they might be at a relative's house or at the park or somewhere where they can then start to make sense of what's going on for them. Because these sensitive, empathic children are taking in so much. And the thing is, they don't have the boundaries, they don't have the talents or the skills yet because they're young. We can teach them till the cows come home, but they're not always going to resort back to that. Whereas as a highly sensitive, empathic adult, I have practices in place, a little bit like brushing your teeth, I suppose, that I use. So hopefully that's a nice little example for the people listening.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. The trick, of course, is helping kids who sometimes have trouble communicating, either in a very literal sense or just, they don't know what they want, they don't know what they need. So that can take some work. But that's fascinating. I want to keep track of our time. If people want to work with you, how can they do that?
So the best,
because again, they can work with you no matter where in the world they are, right? Because we have people calling in from all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got so many different things. So the best place to go is helenjoybutler.com. And, there's ebooks on there. I run, what am I talking about? I run the circles, but I have them at my house. I'm doing a retreat. There's online courses people can do around, create like a DIY, create your own sanctuary kind of concept. So there's so many different resources on my website. It's really the best place to go and just spend some time, take a cup of tea and, use it as a little bit of a sanctuary exploration for yourself to see. I write, for example, newsletters, which of course go out and there's free content, but then, it goes all the way up in different price points that work for people and their budgets.
Okay, that's excellent. I'll include a link below this so people can find that. I'm wondering if there were other questions that the folks from your Facebook page had that we haven't addressed that you think are really key to helping people understand what this is, why it's maybe not be the only piece of the puzzle, but it may be a component of why you feel anxious in your own home, or why your child can't settle.
Well, I'm just having literally a look on my Facebook page as you say that. So the first question I've already answered, which was, how can you tell that you need a space clearing? One of the ladies said, where's the best place to start? And which is the most important place to start? So that's a good question. I suppose it's the same question. Where's the best place to start? When I do a space clearing, when I look at the floor plan, regardless of whether it's in home or distance, I make a very educated decision on where the best place to start is. Quite often it's the front door. I know that might sound a bit unusual.
Now, actually, that makes a lot of sense. It's the entryway, right? It's the...
Yes.
Although I suppose if you don't use it very much, maybe it doesn't have the same impact as it would if that's how you enter the space all the time.
Yes, because you might come in off the garage or in a back door or whatever, however the house lays on the block, you might come in a different way. But if we were to look at it from where would I welcome someone into my house? So if I came to your house and I knocked on the door, that's probably the best place to start. I used to run this online boot camp through Clutter Rescue, and when we started decluttering and organising, we always started at the front door. And my theory was that this is where we welcome people into our home. It's where we welcome new opportunities into our home. So it's a great place to start. And which is the most important place to start? Well, part of me thinks you could start in the place which you think intuitively, coming back to that word that we said about an hour ago, where you know in your heart is the best place to do this. If I went into a home and the client said to me, I would really like to organise and declutter my entire home, Helen, I would start in the master bedroom. So that's always a good spot to start, because that's where we need that connection with ourselves.
And that's a question too, which I guess people can maybe learn from your website. But is that possible? Can people work with you to clear a single room in their home, or is that not really enough to make a real difference?
Look, it would make a difference, but I tend to focus on the whole house, because usually what we've done, say for example, we did a master bedroom and we cleared the space energetically. Then we've got a beautiful, let's say, polished piece of crystal is the analogy for the bedroom. But then we might walk out of the bedroom and we've now got the dirty window. So it's best to do the whole. To take whole.
Yeah, that makes sense.
One of the ladies has also asked, how can we get started with the tools we already have at home? And this is where it comes right back to what is my intention. Because if I have a smudge stick, if I have a gong, and I'm walking around using that, yet at the same time I'm thinking about the argument I had with my partner, the difficulties I'm having with work, the problems I'm having with my children, whatever the negativity is going through my head, you're probably not going to make much of a difference anyway. So the response I would give to that lady is actually, you don't start with the tools, you start with your intention. And if I say this lovely quote, which I never get right, Alison, so please forgive me, but when I was doing my training, we were saying, there's a quote that says, if I don't have a gong, or if I don't have a smudge stick, if I don't have a tool to use to clear the space, what could I use? You go, well, I could use my hands, because my hands can clap and they can make a noise in the same way, a gong can make a noise. You go, well, what if I didn't have my hands? You say, you use your heart. And that's the intention.
That's a beautiful quote, and thank you for sharing that. And I think it also shows the importance, right, to keep what we're wanting to bring instead of what we're trying to get rid of.
Exactly, because and we're brought up in our culture, we tend to focus on the negative. And what we want to really do with the space clearing is go, what's my intention? What positive would I like to see come of this?
Yeah, so that's just a gorgeous, and maybe that's a really good place to stop then, is to think about bringing in the positive instead of pushing out the negative. So thank you so much for joining us for the summit. I really, really appreciate that. I hope people will take some time to look through your site and just explore whether this seems like something that might make sense for them. So thank you for joining us, Helen, and thank you everyone for being with us. And we hope you'll stick around for another interview on the summit. Thanks.